Thank you.
Never gonna let you go. Never gonna let
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the February 6th, 2023 Glendale Water and Power Commission meeting. With that, I will gavel the meeting to order. Item number one.
Item number one, roll call. Commissioner Fay. Here. Commissioner Jasmadarian.
Here.
Commissioner Laurie.
Here.
President Peterson.
Here. That we'll move on to item number two.
Item number two, consent items. 2A, approval of December 5, 2022 meeting minutes.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Having had a motion and having it seconded, do we have any discussion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimously. Item number three.
Item number three, GWP Commission staff comments.
Why don't we start with staff comments?
President Peterson, members of the commission, Michael DeGhetto, Chief Assistant General Manager for Water. And I just wanted to note that our solar and energy storage presentation has a few updates. So the one we're going to show here is going to have those updates in it. And we're going to email out to the commissioners kind of the updated version, as well as that's what's going to be posted on the city website. In case anyone wants to look it up, they can see the one that we're presenting today. Atine Hartunian has an update as well.
Thank you. Commission President Peterson and members of Commission, hello, my name is Atine Hartunian. I'm the Marketing Manager at Glendale Water and Power. I'm here to update you on two upcoming events that we have planned. For the first one, I'd like to formally invite the Commission and the public to our upcoming electric vehicle ribbon cutting ceremony, as you can see up on the screen, for the newly installed EV chargers at the Glendale Marketplace parking structure. This event will take place on Wednesday, February 22nd at 10 a.m. at the Glendale Marketplace parking structure's bottom floor, where the EV chargers are currently located. Also, Commissioner Peterson has graciously agreed to be our MC for the event, and we thank him for assisting us. We ask that our guests enter the parking lot off of Artsakh Street and not on Harvard, and park on the upper floors and take the elevator down to where the event is located on the bottom floor. We will have signs that guide the public and our guests to the event. Our second event we have planned is our upcoming rain barrel distribution event on March 19th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at the Foothill Municipal Water District offices at 4536 Hampton Road in La Cañada. The flyer is up on the screen. The event is brought to you by several utilities, including Glendale Water and Power, Foothill Municipal Water District, Crescenta Valley Water District, Liberty, Pasadena Water and Power, and Burbank Water and Power. The rain barrels must be pre-ordered and picked up on this date. There will be no on-site sales. So the information for ordering the rain barrels is on our website. Customers can also visit rainbarrelsintl.com. And we will have multiple events throughout the year. So if rain barrels are sold out for this event, we will have more in the future. So we encourage our customers to put in their orders and pick them up. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks.
Great, thank you. Having no other staff reports, we'll move on to commission reports. I will start to my left. Commissioner Lowry.
I'm sorry, what?
Any reports that you have out for us?
No.
Okay. Commissioner Jasmine.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Commissioner Fay.
I'm proud to share that I'm the new owner of a heat pump hot water heater that replaced my gas water heater with a very, very efficient electric water heater, and looking forward to getting my GWP rebate for that. Applications in the mail.
The only thing that I would share is that maybe at a future point and we'll get more into it when we talk about our agenda forecast, but just to share that I've heard comments regarding speed or lack of speed with regard to permitting, particularly with solar permitting, since it is part of the topics that we have. But just wanted to say that we do get comments and hear things from the general public, and during reports we can at least share that this is a topic that seems to be foremost for many people. So looking forward to having that discussion sometime in the future. With that, I have no further reports on my end. So we'll move on to item number 4.
Next item, number 4, reports. Item number 4A, solar and energy storage in Glendale.
President Peterson, members of the commission, Annetta Badalian is going to give a presentation on solar and energy storage in Glendale, and I would say that it's related to customers own solar and energy storage as opposed to something that the utility itself has. And so I'll turn it over to Annetta.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Annetta Badalian, Business Transformation Manager with Glendale Water and Power, and I'll be doing a brief presentation on solar energy storage, customer-owned solar and energy storage installed in Glendale. GWP was one of the first municipal utilities to offer solar rebates in California. City Council first approved GWP solar rebates in 2001. In 2006, SB1 mandated certain funding and reporting requirements for local solar programs with oversight provided by the California Energy Commission. The SB1 mandate ended December 31st of 2016, at which point many local utilities stopped providing solar rebates. But the Glendale City Council approved the continuation of the GWP solar rebate program for residential customers through at least June 30, 2018, but we continued with the program until end of June 2022. GWP also continues offering NEM 1.0 to customers, even though NEM capacity exceeded 5% of GWP's peak load in 2018. So we could have stopped at 17 megawatts, but we continued with we actually still continue with our NEM program. It's not working. Can you do it from there? Oh. Okay. Some program stats for the 20 years that we had the solar incentive program. The distribution of incentivized installations, the bulk of those were residential. 1,459 systems were incentivized. 64 small business systems were incentivized, 4 large business, and 12 affordable housing projects that installed solar. So we had a total of over 1,500 systems incentivized through those 20 years. The payments, again, for residential, it was 11.8 million, 2 million for small business, 1.6 million on large business projects, and $500,000 on affordable housing projects. So we've paid nearly 16 million in incentives throughout those 20 years. Now, the capacity that's been installed, solar and energy storage, this includes incentivized and non-incentivized. We've had a total of 2,332 systems, residential systems installed, and these statistics are as of the end of the prior month, so end of January of 2023, with a total capacity of 14 megawatts. We've had 119 systems installed at non-residential sites with a capacity of 11 megawatts. That puts us at 2,451 systems installed with a total capacity of 25 megawatts. The energy storage that's been installed, now GWP started tracking energy storage installations in 2019. Before that, installations were done directly through building and safety, so we have no records of what was installed before 2019. But as of 2019 and ending January of this year, we've had 142 energy storage units installed at residential sites, totaling 682 kW capacity and 1,767 kWh capacity. We've had 2 energy storage units installed at non-residential sites with a capacity of 10 kilowatts and 26 kilowatt hours. That puts us at 144 units installed total, with a total capacity of 692 kW and 1,793 kWh. I do want to mention that 10% of single-family homes in Glendale have solar installed. This is based on the number of single-family connections we have and the number of residential systems installed. This graph shows all systems and all PV systems installed. This is the incremental number of systems per fiscal year. And as you can see, we started in fiscal year 2002. And our installation, the orange is the incentivized and the blue is non-incentivized system. So the bulk of the installations were incentivized up until we ended the incentive program in 2022. You see the spike in 2017 and started dwindling down, and after COVID, it went down even more. And then we spiked last fiscal year, and we expect this fiscal year to be a significant spike when compared to last year's. We've had those installations that you see in just 7 months, so that is expected to be about double at the end of this fiscal year. And this graph shows the incremental capacity installed in kilowatts. Again, the incentivized and non-incentivized, the non-incentivized being blue and orange being incentivized. And there are large commercial systems installed. That's where you see the blue in 2018 being significantly more than the orange because those commercial systems were not incentivized. How does Glendale do when compared to neighboring cities? You can see the numbers for Glendale Water and Power, Burbank, and Pasadena. We have 2,451 systems installed with total capacity of 25 megawatts, which is 7% of our peak load. And the number of customers with PV systems, this is all customers again, commercial and residential, it's 2.79% of customers having solar. Burbank has over 1,000 systems with a total capacity of 11 megawatts, which is 3% of their peak load, and about 2% of their customers have solar. Pasadena has 2,044 systems with a total capacity of 20 megawatts, 6%, which accounts for 6% of their peak load, and they have slightly more customers with PV at 2.97%. Resolution number 22-125. The City of Glendale is fully supportive of ensuring a clean energy future for its citizens. On August 16, 2022, City Council adopted Resolution 22-125, which adopts policies and practices designed to reach a goal of having at least 10% of customers adopt solar and energy storage by the end of 2027, develop additional demand management measures with a minimum total peak dispatchable and peak load reducing capacity of 100 megawatts, and staff was tasked with drafting a request for proposal to engage services to develop the plan and complete studies and analysis. The solar RFP, it was called develop a plan to increase solar penetration and develop additional distributed energy resources. There are 3 categories of services requested with this RFP. Solar, and the category 1 being solar and distributed energy resources development. The second category is estimate of dispatchable capacity analysis, and the third category, cost and benefit analysis. The RFP posted on December 8 of 2022. It is going to close on February 17 at 5 p.m. It was initially February 10. We did extend it another week. We posted the addendum extending it last Friday. Each category may be awarded to a different, may award each category of services separately or as one contract. So far, we've had 5 letters of intent. About 100 emails were sent to over 65 companies. CMUA, SCAPA, APPA were also asked to post the link to the RFP on their websites. Our next steps, once we have a plan to increase solar penetration in Glendale, we will start designing new programs per City Council direction. We will explore the possibility of bringing back the Solar Solutions Incentive Program. We will also need to incentivize the addition of energy storage to install PV systems. As you saw, we have a lot of PV systems that are not paired with energy storage currently. And in case of any questions about solar, we have a phone number, a solar hotline, and an email, a solar email that questions can be sent to. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from Commission, starting with Commissioner Lowry?
Yes, thank you very much for all that information. You said that right now it's 2.79% of all the customers, and we've got 10% of homes. So obviously, the multifamily seems to be a
big factor.
Yeah, big factor. And do we have any thoughts as far as how that market penetration can be improved on the multifamily?
So, Commissioner, that is one of the things we're hoping to get out of this analysis that will be done by whoever we contract with as a result of this RFP.
Okay. And on the solar permits now, do we have any data on the lead time for permit applications?
I know that's something that's being looked at by our engineering section to shorten that. Well, let me backtrack. We do have a much faster service now for those systems that are under 15 kilowatts. So that is that has been in effect since May of last year. So those permits are being issued much quicker than before. The handful of installations that are required to go through our engineering section, that's where the delay is, and that is something that's being looked at currently.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Jasmine-Darian.
I don't have any more questions. I'm looking forward to the report and seeing what the recommendations are. Thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioner Fay.
Thank you. First of all, I'd just like to preface my questions by saying I'm a happy solar customer. I appreciate the rebate and the incentive. I got in there right before the program ended, and that was definitely a motivator for me. As soon as I bought my house, I kind of saw there's a ticking clock here, so I probably would have been off to the right side of that chart, but accelerated. So I'm curious if you saw that effect from other people. And my experience was that the permitting was seamless and quick and very good. So I know that's probably not always the case, and you probably don't hear from people who have my experience as much as people who have a negative experience, but everyone I worked with and communicated with at GWP, just from a customer perspective, before I was a commissioner, it was a great process. So I think that's going very well.
Happy to hear that. Thank you.
So the question I asked about the timing, would you mind going back to the chart and kind of show the distribution by year? I'm kind of curious to know, why did we end the incentive, and what impact has that change had on the number of projects?
We ended the incentive because we were, well, the main reason, I guess, being the clean energy programs that we were looking at the time. The virtual power plant was something that was being considered, so it was not going to work with the incentive program being there. It was going to be in conflict with the program that was being considered. And we were the last utility to offer it, the very last one. It was LA and us, and then LA ended their program, and we're still going. It did not have a great effect on a negative effect on the number of installations, because even during the period when we were offering the incentive program, only 60% of installations were incentivized. People were still installing systems even without applying, or applying and not.
Why wouldn't that be 100%? It's free money.
No, yeah, I don't know, I'm not sure. But, well, there is extra paperwork, of course, for the incentive program. That may have been one of the hurdles that, it was a seamless process, like you said, but not every contractor wants to deal with the paperwork, and it is mostly the contractors who submit incentive applications. But the trend, we haven't seen a major decline of installations after the incentive program ended. It sort of coincided with, towards the end of the incentive program, it coincided with the pandemic, but I can't say that, like, you're seeing the spike again this year without an incentive.
Okay. So the idea, we ended the incentive because there was going to be a different program, the virtual power plant, but that never came to fruition, right? So now we're kind of back with no local incentive for customers to do this.
That's correct.
But we agree as a policy matter, this is a good thing customers ought to be doing. We ought to encourage them, but we don't have a program at the moment to support them in that.
Correct.
Why have we continued the net energy metering policy 1.0? I mean, the state and other utilities have made a lot of changes to net metering in the last years. Why have we decided to stick with the 1.0 rules?
Again, my understanding is that it's to benefit the customers, because now 1.0 is much more beneficial to customers than the 2.0 and 3.0 that came after.
So is that's something that's on the table here with the consultant RFP, is looking at modifying our net metering rules to be maybe more aligned with what the state is doing?
It's a possibility. I'm not sure at this point, but there could be analysis showing that we should be moving on to NEM 2.0 or 3.0.
Yeah, it seems like if our priorities as an organization are to really solve for kind of controllable, dispatchable energy, that the energy storage component is probably more important than the solar component in terms of what customers are doing. So I would think it's probably time to reevaluate the net metering program, and it may be too generous for customers, and it's not necessarily incentivizing the right kind of behavior. But yeah, I agree with you as a participant. It is great. It's a very generous program, but are we incentivizing the right thing with public funds, I think is the question, right?
Yeah, that's a valid question, yes.
Mm-hmm. For those customers who did install energy storage, does the utility have any access or rights or any special priority to tap into that, and there's a case of a grid emergency or anything like that?
No, there has been no such restrictions on the installations.
Is that something that we might reconsider in a future program if we're going to be incentivizing energy storage?
Yes, that would be part of it, yes. Mm-hmm.
For future energy storage programs, how might that work with customers who already have solar, because you had a chart that showed the number of solar customers and the number who installed energy storage was much lower, right? And my experience was that why would I install a battery when I have net metering? So I get all the financial benefits of having a battery without paying for a battery. And the Glendale grid is, blissfully reliable, so I don't have any benefit there, right? So how do you think through that? If we want customers to be installing energy storage behind the meter at their own home, how do we make that a useful proposition for them?
Again, we are hoping this RFP is going to give us a study that gives us a good roadmap of what to do with those installations, how to incentivize the installation of energy storage as well.
Okay. On the charts you showed, we talk a lot about comparing to Burbank and Pasadena, and I understand they're neighbors, but are they necessarily the best peer agencies? And this maybe is a broader question for all of our reports. I'd be curious to see how some of these numbers compare to other progressive public utilities like Austin or SMUD. And so maybe as we're all preparing charts, we can think a bit bigger than just Burbank and Pasadena. I know we use them often, but
Commissioner Fay, it is something at the city that we do for everything, salary comparisons, comparisons related to the net energy metering, to water, all those things. It's always been just something the city does, is compared to like a similarly sized and neighboring city with a utility. I hear what you're saying, and maybe that's something, it's definitely something we bring up when we talk about salary comparisons, but we get a lot of pushback kind of outside of GWP at the city level related to comparing to like LADWP or other cities. But, honestly, for something like this, to me, it would be like Southern California Edison is something I would think that we would compare to, but it usually isn't something that we do. I think maybe on some of the KD and SADI and the reliability things, we might compare to Edison sometimes in those charts I've seen, but that's something we could look at, I think, for sure, when we look at these sorts of programs.
yeah, I just encourage us to think bigger. There's a whole world out there and that beyond Burbank and Pasadena and Glendale. So
And we do look at other utilities. There are 10 other utilities I would say I usually track when I try to compare. But Burbank and Pasadena being neighboring and being of the same size.
similar solar resource
Similar
and everything.
population,
So.
yeah. It's just more reflective.
Are there some other public utilities that are really hitting it out of the park with solar that have much higher penetration rates, or?
I'm sure there are a few. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but yeah, those are statistics that we could provide.
Maybe the consultant we end up hiring could give us an overview of kind of where we stack up there.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the information.
Welcome.
Thank you to my colleagues for their comments. I have a couple of comments and questions. Again, thank you for the excellent overview and report, as always. Just a couple things, since these meetings are for the general public as well, and I know we get tossed with a lot of jargon, so I'm glad that you used the words net energy metering. You were saying NEM, so by net energy metering, what we're talking about is the ability for somebody who over-generates electricity at their local premise, such as their solar power panels, beyond what they use, they can sell that to Glendale Water and Power. And the generous comments that were coming out from Commissioner Fay is that the rate at which Glendale Water and Power is willing to pay a residential generator is higher than many other programs that have it. So I just wanted to explain that a little bit. And the whole point there then is, are we disincentivizing, as Commissioner Fay put out, suggested that if our system is highly reliable, so it rarely goes down, then it's in my interest to go ahead and over-generate on the solar generation side to put it into the grid for Glendale Water and Power, which you're telling us is actually beyond the peak need typically that we have. So that power is really just not necessarily benefiting Glendale Water and Power. One thought that I did have, though, was that possibly the reason why we haven't seen as much of a drop-off in solar installations is because of the generous net metering that we have, that people say, oh, I can install this thing, and even though I don't get an incentive to defray the cost of installation, I get an incentive to own it and operate it, and it pays me back. So possibly if we change the net metering, it may, again, more urgently raise the issue about looking at an incentive program for our installations.
I think one other explanatory factor why there hasn't been a drop-off when the incentive changed is that the increased value of the tax credit from 26% to 30% is probably about a wash with what the value of the GWP incentive would have been. So it's kind of the same cost to the customer. In that sense, maybe we're substituting federal funds from tax rebates, so instead of using local utility funds to accomplish the same thing.
Excellent point. Thank you for that. And then when we're talking about storage, notice that we have a pretty impressive number. I think it was 1,766 kilowatt hours or something like that of storage, if my memory serves. That sounds like a lot. And if I translate that, that turns out to 73.625 days. So I'm like, my goodness, are you saying that if our network went down, if the grid went down, that we have 70, almost 74 days of stored electricity that's just sitting out there for us to tap into? And obviously we know that's not the case. So it may be helpful to, when we show that kind of data, instead of just showing sort of this number that is somewhat meaningless, 1,700 kilowatt hours, what that really might be is that each unit could maybe give about 30 minutes of electricity, and you have a whole bunch of them that are out there, but all of them cumulatively still is only 30 minutes, just at a higher potential amount. I'm not sure what the actual, I'm just tossing out some numbers, but that would help us understand, and the community understand, how much resiliency we're building into the system and whether we're incentivizing the right behavior with regard to the kinds of storage. And then the question comes down to is, are we able to then engineer such that if we can tap into the storage, that we can do it in some sort of sequential way, obviously, so that we can drain one set of batteries, move to the next set of batteries, to the next set of batteries in a rolling sequence, such that we may get hours versus just tapping into any and all batteries all at the same time, and we sort of get what we get for a quick duration of time. I'm not sure what all the engineering is. We have the experts here, but to me, that was sort of a question that came out, that that sort of data wasn't particularly helpful to me, and might be an opportunity to bring a little more clarity into the future on that.
Will do.
Another thing was, looking again, you made the mention that we have about 10% participation in solar. Was that?
Single-family homes? 10% of single-family homes have solar.
Okay, so again, I was looking at, there's 79,743 housing units in the city of Glendale, of which about 34% are owner-occupied, which I would use that as a proxy for coming up with a single-family home, let's say. So somewhere in the 28,000 single-family homes kind of number, and we had about 1.7, about 1,700 solar units in the residential side of things, non-commercial. So to me, that comes across as about 5% rather than maybe 10%.
So the numbers that I took, so the number of residential systems being 2,332, and the single-family connections that we have services is 24,000.
Okay.
So when you take, divide 2332 by 24,000, it comes to about 10%.
Okay. And then you said you wanted to have 10% of customers
Customers.
participating. So again, if we have 79, almost 80,000 housing units, are you going by housing units or owner occupied or?
Well, we're looking at all customers, including commercial. The way.
So just the customer base,
Correct.
whichever has a discrete bill that we're billing out to, the idea is to then have 10% of those, that billed number be some kind of a solar.
Correct.
Okay, that was helpful to me to understand which that was. But again, I would also echo Commissioner Fay's concern about benchmarking to just two other entities. Granted, they may be the most relevant, but I might just use the analogy that if I just compare myself to my brothers, and let's say I have two brothers, you know, there may be something that one family is doing that's very different than another family, and so that within the family, I might look pretty good, you know. Neither of my brothers graduated from high school, so me getting a high school degree was phenomenally good. And I'm not saying that in some families that isn't a great, achievement, but that may be very different than looking at, if you have another family where there's, three siblings and they all have medical degrees. So it may be, I would suggest as well, worthwhile for us to just, for smiles and grins, kind of look at a universe of things and just see what might seem most applicable to us.
President Peterson, I understand that comment, but there's a flip side to that. As far as the Public Utilities Commission can mandate a lot of things, and they can also mandate a lot of charges on customer bills that we really don't have that same capability to do. So it is good, to look at those numbers, but there's a big caveat related to that. Whereas, we have rules that we have to follow that are much closer to those utilities that we do our normal comparisons with. So I just want to put that caveat in there.
No, Mr. Delgado, that is an excellent point. And I think I would suggest that it maybe, again, underscores Commissioner Fay's and my comments that what we might see is that, PUC overseen or governed utilities might have very different metrics. And we might see what looked like, I think the quote was knocking it out of the ballpark type of thing. But then we can ask ourselves, why? And if we say, oh, it's because the PUC is doing X and we are not, then the second question is, can we do X? And if the answer is no, because the state regulation defines that we do Y and we can't do X. But on the other hand, it might be like, actually, we can do X. We could just pass, the city council resolution. We could go ahead and change a policy. So that's why, in my mind, it would seem like there was some benefit and worthwhile utility, to use the pun, to go ahead and compare our utility to some of these other ones, just to kind of see if we're noticing some very different outcomes and then asking ourselves, are we able to emulate any portion of that outcome by changing anything that we are allowed to do, or might we start lobbying for certain things so that we can point to other ones, so we can go to our state legislators and say, if you allow us to do what the PUC does, look what we might be able to do. Just a thought, just a suggestion that I echo with Commissioner Fay. Thank you. Those are my questions and comments.
Thank you.
Sure.
Forgive me, I was prompted with another idea, piggyback on something you said. So thinking about the community of our neighbors who have chosen to invest in solar, I think that's, it says something. You have to go out of your way to do this, right? What do we know about these people, these customers as a segment? Do we know about them demographically, income, energy use? How can we certainly have their contact information. Can we, promote other programs to them? Are they maybe more likely to own an electric vehicle or own a Nest thermostat? What are we doing to kind of cross-sell the different programs and services that we offer?
We do have some data points on them. We, at least the last 5 years, I want to say, we've been asking whether they have an EV. So that is data we have on hand. As far as cross-selling other programs, we haven't targeted specifically our solar customers. We always do all residential customers in general if it's a program for residential customers. Most of them are homeowners, obviously, single-family homeowners. There isn't, we don't track income, so we don't have that information. So there isn't a whole lot of info besides what's available on the application and the account that is being tracked.
So I would suggest that in any business, knowing who your customer is one of the most important things. And I think we ought to know more about a customer, especially if the utility is going to be granting them an incentive that's very valuable, and thousands of dollars in some cases. Getting a little bit of information back in exchange seems pretty fair. So I'd like us to consider doing that, what information would be useful. And then also, thinking about these people who choose to put in solar and have done so earlier than 90% of their neighbors, those are probably people that are more likely to do other new technology things earlier than their neighbors. And as we're trying to encourage, energy storage at home or time of use electric vehicle meter, whatever it is, let's think about this as an early adopter customer group, and maybe, we can keep going back to them with new products and new services and get better adoption than the pool of customers at large.
Yeah, of course.
Commissioner Fay, I think, embedded in something that you were mentioning, as I recall, part of the reason that we ended the incentive program is because we chose to use that money to provide for low-income folks and assistance, and budget that money towards that instead of continuing that incentive. So again, a caveat that I would kind of always bring up, which gets to your point about the demographics of the folks that are taking advantage of this. We want to be cognizant of focusing programs, if we do this with like public benefit money, towards folks that maybe are less able to afford it, right? Because just as you said, if people are still doing it without that incentive, then they must be able to do it, right? And so, it's that issue of using money that we collect from everyone, just being kind of socially responsible with it when we provide incentives.
Yeah, totally agree on the social equity aspects of it. I'm thinking just from a sales and marketing perspective. We know these customers have demonstrated to us that they are tech forward, and we should take advantage of that on other offerings we have for them. I'd be curious to know if there is any appreciable impact on a customer's electricity usage after they deploy solar. If the attitude maybe is, oh, now my electricity's free, I'll just leave the lights on all night. Or maybe because these are people who chose to be early adopters of solar, they're also maybe more efficient than their neighbors or something like that. And maybe that's something we could include in the consultant scope of work, or that could be a question we try to get them to look at. Is this, what other behaviors does it signal for people who make that transition? I know in my case, since I went solar, I've tried to electrify other aspects of my home, so my electricity use is actually going way up. Switch to a heat pump instead of a furnace, that kind of thing. So it'd be interesting to know, and I think that'll help us plan as solar rolls out to more and more customers. And then just a note for future reporting on progress on these goals. I think kind of to what Commissioner Peterson was saying, the numbers presented in an abstract are not all that meaningful. Even if we know we have 80,000 customers, we can kind of do the math. I would like to see more presented against our goals. And I think the City Council articulated what the goals are. And so now we have a clear yardstick to measure. So if we're going to have 10% customers adopt solar by 2027, what's our goal for 2023? What's our goal for 24? How do we get to 10%? And how are we doing against those goals? So I think that would be a more useful way to report on our progress, because it's easy to throw around big numbers. Oh, we have 1,000 customers. Is that good? Is that bad? We don't really know. So maybe there's another way to contextualize that in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So now that you've gotten everybody going on this concept, just a suggestion that possibly when someone's applying for the solar rebates, you can offer them a whole house audit that would look at not just energy but water conservation and be able to make recommendations on being able to conserve in other areas as well. So I know the city offers that. I don't know if you have enough staffing to cover that much, but it's something to consider.
Yes, that is something we used to require for the incentive program back when we had audit program. They had to do the energy audit before applying for the incentive, become as energy efficient as possible before installing solar.
Thank you to my fellow colleagues for their comments and questions, and particularly thank you, Ms. Badalian, for your presentation and for your patience in answering all the questions. I love your title, Business Transformation Manager, so we look forward to hearing more about transformative businesses that you're going to be bringing to us in the future. So looking forward to that, but thank you very much for today. Item 4B.
Item 4B, water conservation update.
President Peterson, members of the commission, Michael Ghetto, Chief AGM for Water, and I'm going to give an update on water conservation and water supply. And, you know, as I usually start, it's really important just to kind of keep in mind our sources of water, both local in Glendale and our outside sources. And our outside sources come from the Metropolitan Water District, and they really have two sources. One would be from the State Water Project, and the other one would be from the Colorado River Aqueduct. And both of those have separate watersheds that feed them, and I'll go into that a little bit more during this update. So locally, we have water from the San Fernando Basin, the Verdugo Basin, and the LA Glendale Water Reclamation Plant. And I always show 100% as customer demand, and then you subtract from that, and that's how much water we buy from Metropolitan. So that's our most expensive source, and that's the water that we use to make up the difference between customer demand and our local supplies. So, you know, the storms that we got locally were really good for us, for customers to turn off their irrigation systems, right? So we can store more water, Metropolitan can store more water for future use. Now, those storms also provided a lot of precipitation up in the Sierras. Like I showed in that first slide, that's one of our major supplies is the Sierras. And what I'm plotting here, and I have the webpage, and anybody can go to that webpage and you can pick the years that you want to plot. But the thick blue line is current precipitation. So that's above, right now it's above average, but it flatlined a little bit, right? Because there haven't been more storms. It's above, let's see, the other line I plotted in blue was, I think it's 2021, which was very low. And then 21-22 was last year. So it's above average, which is really good because the state was able to up its allocation from 5% to 30% on the State Water Project. And so those storms basically allowed the state to do more exports, and it increased storage in Lake Oroville and in San Luis Reservoir. And again, this is from a press release that anybody can go click on that on the state's website and take a look at that. But, you know, it was really a missed opportunity because the Delta Conveyance Project still hasn't been built. There's been a lot of iterations over the decades for that project. And really, it's a huge stormwater capture project. I get so many questions about stormwater capture. This is the most important stormwater capture project and enhancement that the city of Glendale could have. And just to give an idea, because of the way the system currently operates through the Bay Delta, 202,000 acre feet of water was lost that could have been captured had this project been in place. So that's about 10 years worth of water for the city of Glendale, just went out to the ocean. So this is a really important project, and now it's called the Delta Conveyance Project, this current iteration of this governor and his team. So it's a really important project. It's in the environmental process right now, and people can comment and do things like that if you go to the Delta Conveyance Project website. So that will be a very important project for the city and for residents to support whenever it gets to the point of funding it and building it. Now, the other good news is that there was precipitation in the Colorado Basin. And this chart is from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation website. And the thing to look at, the way this Colorado system operates is based on reservoir levels. The reservoirs are much larger than on the State Water Project. So there can be big swings in water that's available on the State Water Project from year to year, whereas this one's more in decade spans. And the Bureau of Reclamation looks at the probability of water levels in Lake Mead. And those are triggers to cutbacks based on those levels, those water levels. It's feet above sea level, like 1,020 is 1,020 feet above sea level. So the projections, let's say that first column, in August of 2022, there was a 47% chance that Lake Mead was going to be less than 1,020 feet. Based on the updates in January, it dropped to 17%. So it's like really good news. Now, the worst case scenario, they call it dead pool, which means you can't get water out of the lake. It's still 0% chance kind of all across the bottom up until 2027, which is good news. But you look at, for the minimum to generate power, there was a 7% chance that the lake would be below that level in 2026, and that dropped to 0%. So that would be Lake Mead less than 950 feet, the last column right before the gray column. So it's improved on Colorado River, but there's still a lot of issues to get the states to agree on how to go forward and have cutbacks on that. So there's a possibility that Metropolitan might do an allocation plan because of that. And I'll talk about that in a few slides. So for Glendale and use in Glendale, it's the green line was last year, the green line with the yellow boxes. So the mandatory conservation definitely had an effect during the summer. And we've been about a 9.3% reduction versus 2020, about 1 billion gallons saved. And really since 2015 versus 2013, which was like the last kind of unrestrained year of water use, it's been about 12.4 billion gallons that residents and businesses have saved. And I would just say in the 2019, I talk a lot about wet Februaries. So that was a very wet February. So that's like probably the lowest use we've had since I've been tracking it. And then the black line, where it in that March and April kind of flat lines, that was COVID. So that was all commercial use that just dropped off during that period. And again, I talk about this a lot. When I get questions about, why is it so focused on single family and lawns? So single family residential is the orange line. And basically the vast majority of the reductions during mandatory conservation last year is single family residential, right? That peak would have been more like summer of 2020, but it even dropped below the use by multifamily. So, and even with adding more dwelling units, we still have like about 18% reduction in use. And again, it's all outdoor. So Metropolitan is still considering an allocation to its member agencies like Glendale, and it's really due at this point in time due to the Colorado River supplies. but we really won't have a determination from Met until around April. So we're going to remain in phase 3, which is the 2 days a week watering. And we're working with Metropolitan providing input on that water supply allocation planning process. And you can go to Met's webpage and look up what their wisdom plan is. So we're in phase 3, 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Saturday, no more than 10 minutes at each station. And honestly, right now, you probably shouldn't have your irrigation on at all because there's really no reason to. We're always in phase 1. It's basically against the municipal code to do these things anytime, even if we're not in one of the mandatory conservation phases. Met's upped its turf rebate to $3 a square foot. We've got the smart home upgrades, which is like Commissioner Jasmine was asking, where our contractor comes in and looks at everything in your house and helps you update that. The water insight, and it's really important to have your updated email address in our system so you can get leak alerts and things like that. Then we've got rebates for different appliances. And then on our website, we have a lot of great links to go and look at the different kind of plants that make sense to plant in your yard that are appropriate for our climate, and just other water saving tips. And that's my update. So if there's any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Delgado. Appreciate that. Comments or questions? Commissioner Lowry?
Yes. First of all, I would like to compliment GWP on a couple of items. I recently had well, in the last year, they changed the street light in front of my house to a new LED street light, and it does a phenomenal job. And I know it's less power and certainly less maintenance and everything, and definitely want to compliment the GWP on that. Another thing, recently had an excessive water usage notice sent to my attention, and I think this is just a terrific service that GWP is providing. In the first incident, it was about a year ago, and we get an email and it says that we have some excessive water usage, and it started at this time on this day, and we knew that that was the particular time that our gardener is always at our house. And for whatever reason, he'd never done this before, but there was one hose bib that had a slow leak, and there was quite a bit of water there. And the second happened about a month ago. We left town, had somebody come in and house sit, and in a 14-hour period, there was about 2,200 gallons of water that was used. And we didn't get the email until we got back from vacation. And my wife said, "How can this be?" And so I went in and I flushed the toilet and timed how long it took to refill. And I said, it's 1.6 gallons per minute and 180 gallons, per hour times 14 hours comes out to 2,200 gallons. And I said, that was it. And it just happened that the person that was house sitting for us did not realize that they'd used the toilet and the toilet was running. And the frustrating thing was we just had that toilet rebuilt before we left, so something like this wouldn't happen. But so I think that's a terrific program. I'm just wondering what are the different ways that you can contact somebody when this happens? I mean, we got an email, but is there any way that somebody could make a call in a situation like this?
Commissioner Lowry, sometimes we do call. The customer service reps will make a call to someone to notify them. But the thing about what you're describing, it's part of our automated metering infrastructure. So it's really computer driven, right? When we talk about business transformation and things like that. So it's like, it's a real automated process. And so the best thing is email. I think you can also put a phone number and maybe get a text as well. You can, and it's up to you, to go in there. Like if you don't want text or whatever, then don't put the text. But you can definitely log in the system and kind of add those things in. And I'm pretty sure you can put a backup number too as well.
How often does it happen? It happened twice to me.
I didn't put that in my report, but we might send out like 1,500 of those in a month.
In a month?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Honestly, I get them for one of our sites, one of our facilities.
Anybody ever run the
it's
numbers
irrigation.
to see how much water is really lost? I mean, it seems like a lot
As I
to me.
recall, we did a report on that, and I want to see it's a couple percentage of our total use gets conserved because of that program. I want to say it was like around 3% or something like that. We report on that to Metropolitan. We get some funding from Metropolitan for like, oh gosh, I forgot the name of the program, but it's like a locally run program, and that's what we use it for that, for that software.
Right. I just, I think that back in August when we were getting the texts about the, everybody turn off everything that you can, and I thought that was really, really effective. I talk with people all the time, and everybody talks about, when we were getting those texts, and I went home and I, did this or that. And I think as far as communicating, GWP communicating with the customers on things like, like you were just showing with the, the water restrictions and the guidelines and everything. I think that texting can be a very effective way to do it, because part of the problem that I see with GWP communicating with their customers is, if you're sending something in the bill, there's one person that opens the bill at each home, and the rest of the people are not seeing that. And unless it comes up at dinner time conversation or whatever, which is, maybe that's not too likely, the rest of the, a large percentage of the people are not seeing this stuff. And I see neighbors still doing, watering, and it rains, and I'm wondering, how long should we turn our sprinklers off for? If we get a good rain like we just had, how long can I turn them off for 2 weeks, or, what?
Commissioner Lowry, it's basically like check your soil. If your soil's damp, you don't need to turn the water on. I mean, that's pretty much the guidance on all the guidance that we read and provide.
I think if that was communicated to people, I think that would, perhaps, get people, because I think a lot of people think that the watering, restrictions were for the summer. I think a lot of people still don't realize that we obviously need to conserve water year round. But a lot of people think about it, well, it's during the summer, or, but anyway.
Thanks.
Other question I had, back to, I know that you've covered this in prior presentations. Statewide, what is the percentage difference between agriculture and, what percentage is agriculture using of the total water, water usage?
Agriculture is about 70%. So it uses a lot more water than what we would call urban use.
Okay. What are your feelings as far as things that can be done statewide with regard to usage? I mean, I was reading about, certain crops that are grown here. We use our water in the state of California, and the crops are exported. And I'm looking at that saying, is that something that we need, as a state, we need to maybe take a look at, the overall benefit to the state when when we've got a precious resource being used. And I mean, if they're growing lettuce in the Imperial Valley and it's in our Trader Joe's salad the next week, I think that's a pretty darn good use of our water. But if we're growing a nut crop that is, exported somewhere else where they have plenty of water, why are we doing that?
Commissioner Lowry, I would say that those are both state and federal issues, kind of to bring up with the legislators at those
I'm just
two
asking.
levels.
Yeah, I'm just, as a water expert, do you have any thoughts on that?
Not that I would kind of publicly say. I mean, and the reason I say that, I was on one of our assembly members, like a panel, and we were prepping, and a question like that came up during prep, and I'm like, oh, that's the one you call the assembly member. And she's like, no, that is not the answer to give on my panel. So that's.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Commissioner Lowry. Commissioner Jasmine Darian?
With all of the rains that came, was Glendale able to capture any, or does it have plans to do any type of stormwater capture, LID development type thing?
Commissioner Jasmine Darian, so really the only stormwater sort of capture things that we do are really related to flood control, right? And the stormwater itself to like prevent or to get that first flush. So it's really more of our public works department kind of does those things. But as far as capturing water for future use, we're actually prohibited from doing that because of the judgment for the upper Los Angeles River area, because essentially all the stormwater belongs to the city of Los Angeles. So we don't, as a utility, have any stormwater capture plans or programs. Now, I've told the public works folks, if they do dry wells or green streets or something like that in the Verdugo Basin, that would be something we could partner in because that would help recharge in the Verdugo Basin. But essentially for the San Fernando Basin, GWP can't help fund any of that because we don't have access to any of that water. We get no benefit from it.
Commissioner Jasmine Darian, I think last meeting that you unfortunately were not able to attend, we got into quite a bit of discussion about the fact that LADWP owns our rain by law on a court case. So we are not allowed to capture that rain and store it for use because we are depriving them of their rain. So that was a point of fact that had come about. But just to your point, it's quite shocking in its way. Commissioner Fay?
Thank you. So one key takeaway I just want to double down on that you said is looking at the charts of water usage is that single-family landscaping seems to be the one big thing that stands out where we have some influence and there's a big enough impact that it's really something we ought to focus on. Did I interpret that right?
Commissioner Fay, yeah, that's correct. That's the biggest place to save. I mean, I definitely understand, folks, a lot of folks want to do what they can, right, to help save. So, inside having the low flush toilets is definitely kind of hardens use, right? And at a lower level, having efficient appliances and things like that helps. But the biggest impact is that outdoor irrigation.
How does that influence our programs or outreach there? I mean, I know you showed a few images of turf removal. That's an MWD program, right? Are there things that we're doing as a utility, specifically in Glendale, that are focused on outdoor water use, maybe above and beyond what Metropolitan's doing?
I would say yes. When you go to our webpage and you look at all the programs and all the sites, it primarily is focused on outdoor. The outreach we do, I think it's every Wednesday, we do a water efficiency post. So it is focused on outdoor use. That's our primary focus.
Okay. Maybe just to tie it back to the solar discussion, those 1,000 homes that installed solar panels probably have landscaping if they're single family. maybe those are people that would be worth targeted outreach to or something like that. So they've showed an interest in environmental sustainability. So maybe it's just a suggestion for you guys to think about. And then pivoting to the water insights, I had a similar experience to Commissioner Lowry where I had no idea there was a leak, and thousands of gallons later, I got an email and it was really useful. And I'm wondering, do we know, and maybe this is a question to take back to the vendor that provides that software, usage statistics or metrics on, of our population of water accounts, how many people log in once a month? How many people get alerts once a month? Do we get access to that kind of data?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Ms. Hartunian to come up, and she knows those numbers.
Hi, I'm back again. We do have access to the water insight information, and that's the program that sends you the text messaging and the email, and that you also have access to the portal as a customer, so you can go in and update your preferences for communication, and also see your usage drilled down by hourly, daily, weekly, monthly. And so we encourage customers to sign up for that portal. And then they also have to give us the right to send them a text message. We can't send text messages without our customers opting in. But on the back end, we do have that information in our dashboard. So we know how many people open our emails, how many people receive the text alerts, how many people receive the actual water reports, how much water is being saved. And we can also, to your point about reaching out to single-family homes, we will be able to access water usage information based on that report and send those customers emails if we know they're watering more than 3 days a week or if they have a leak and so on and so forth. So it is a really good tool to have, and we do target market to our customers in that way. But also, as far as communication and reaching out to them, they do have to opt in for certain preferences.
Great. I don't expect you to have the numbers off the top of your head, but maybe next time we do a water KPIs report, I think since we've established that outdoor residential use is the one big thing we can control, and this is a great program to do that, maybe we can see some of those figures around how many customers are participating, water savings, that kind of stuff.
Yes, we'll provide that.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then one last comment, since Commissioner Lau, you mentioned the communication and how the person who is in the household economy, the person paying the bill or dealing with the GWP website isn't always the one adjusting the thermostat. I think that's an issue we found during the heat wave where in my household, I opt into all the demand response programs, but if my wife gets hot, she's going to go turn the Nest down, right? So the $50 a year incentive is not enough for me to pick that fight at home. So, but it got me thinking, I think as an organization, we conceptualize our customers on like an accounts basis, right? We think about 80,000 accounts, but there's 200,000 people, decision makers that are deciding, do I use energy, do I use water, how do I do that? And I'm wondering from a marketing perspective, how do we deal with this idea that each customer actually has multiple, people or agents that are making decisions? And do we communicate directly to all 3 people in a household or just the primary email on the account for billing purposes? How do we kind of reconcile that?
So it depends on who is on the account, and also who subscribes to our newsletter and who subscribes to the Water Insight program. Those are the ways that we will communicate. So, and then also, unfortunately, if a customer decides to unsubscribe from our newsletter, they unfortunately unsubscribe to all of our email information other than receiving their bill, because those are 2 separate entities. So for any marketing type of outreach, our customers have to sign in to receive the information. So if, for example, they do sign up for the solar program and they receive a solar rebate, they are in the system and we're tagged and we know that they have solar. So in the future, if we'd like to add them to our distribution list, we would have to ask for permission because it's a marketing email. So we can't just send them information without them opting in. So there is that caveat that we have to consider. So as far as households, yes, there are sometimes multiple people in a household that would get the information. Even if you signed up for the peak savings program, if your wife is also on the account and her email is on there, if we do send out an email that she's subscribed for, she will get it as well as you. So it just depends on the customer and the account, that information that we have and what they've opted into.
And within our database of contacts, we track, these 3 email addresses are for 3 different people on one account, and we can kind of keep track of it that way.
We can keep track of that, but we also, when we send out information, we know the open rates and we know who's opened them. If we really want to drill down and see if your household, all 3 emails were sent and all 3 were opened, we could check that if we could, but we don't get into that much detail. We do look at, for example, if we're going to target a certain type of email to single-family homes, we'll quantify it by that. Okay, this is the number of emails that we have. This is the open rate. Why wasn't it open? But as far as going into each household and looking at the demographics, if you will, for contact points, no, we don't go and dive in that deep.
Well, it's an interesting concept to think about, this principal agent gap where the decision maker is not necessarily the one who we're communicating with, right? So I'm glad you guys are thinking about that, and maybe as we consider other programs, that's something we ought to keep in mind, is that we need to communicate with all of the people who live in these homes and work at these businesses, not necessarily just the person who pays the bill.
Right, and then also those are the different people that also follow us on social media, whether it's the different platforms that we have. They aren't essentially the ones that are on the account that we would provide account information to, but they are certainly our customer, and they're the ones that are more social media savvy and are following us on social media, whereas if the other account holder is not, they're just the account holder.
Yeah. No, I know the experience I have when I get emails from my daughter's school. My wife and I both get it, and because she's our daughter and she's precious, the first thing's like, did you get the email from the teacher, right? So, how can we get people to get that excited about emails from their water and power utility, right? So
Definitely.
keep working on that.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Fay. I guess, could we put up slide number 9? I just, having at one time been a professor of statistics at a university, one of the things that you sort of worry about is when you look at something like this, and it seems to show a very nice trend. Upper left to bottom right, things are getting better. But when you kind of drill down, what you see is that 2016, 2017, 2018, or from 2015 through 2018, it was an upward trend going in the wrong direction, potentially, if you put a line through it. If you look at then
Commissioner, or President Peterson, can I interject? Yeah, so 2014, 2013, 2012, when I look at this, those are a grouping, right, of a, like if I was going to estimate water use, that's like a group. 2015 is abnormal because there was mandatory conservation. Again, it was down to 2 days a week. Yep. So 2015 is an outlier. So I would say that the new normal was, again, the 16, 17, 18, right? And then there was a new grouping after that, after it was very wet and there was COVID and those things. It would be the 19, 20, 21. And I would not say that 2022 is a new normal. Now, water use may not rebound to where it was, or it may go back to what it was in 2020. That's how I would interpret this data.
Yes, and that's exact. Thank you very much for that clarification. That's kind of maybe the point I was driving to inelegantly. As you pointed out, where there was an anomaly like in 2015, it may be helpful that because one of the things that I would immediately look to is, there seems to be that grouping of 3, and then there's a new grouping of 3, and having that explanation that you put in saying there was a systemic change in this area of X. This may not be sustainable, doesn't necessarily, or we could point out we made a fundamental policy change or a rate change or something that created that, just so that it may be a little bit helpful.
President Peterson, if you want, I could kind of, because I've talked about it before, but I could,
Yeah.
So this is honestly what I think. In 2015, we spent so much time educating folks on how their sprinkler controllers worked to get them to go to 2 days a week and even 3 days a week. I personally don't think they went back and changed them to how it was before that. I really think that's why it hardened right there. I know a lot of folks took out their lawns and did that kind of stuff, and that contributes to some of it, but I think some of it's more related to just folks leaving their controllers the way it was after the mandatory conservation.
No, and that's really insightful. And to my colleagues' comments about creative things that we might be able to do or transformative things that we might be able to do. If we know that at one point in time we did something like educate people, have people come out and say, we'll program it for you to comply with the 2-day versus 3-day watering, maybe it's worthwhile to have a campaign like that every X number of years where that will reset as you get new people moving in or people moving out and you get a creep coming back up to the old normal, maybe we can help. So that might just be a thought. The other thing that may be just helppful is if it would be nice to maybe also see a graph of prior years before. I get a little bit concerned when the cutoff point is this one potentially artificially high 2014, which makes me think that we've made a huge improvement since then. And I just don't know. It'd be nice to see 2013, 12, 11, and 10 kind
President
of thing.
Peterson, no, that's a good point. I used to have those, but it was just getting so busy. That's why I cut those years off. But maybe I should do 2 charts next time to spread it out more so we could see it a little better. I mean, honestly, I did. I had
Or
those
that
and I cut.
you have another chart that shows like an every 5-year mark for the last 30 years or
That's a
something
good
like
idea.
that, just
Thanks.
so that we can see what seems to be long-term kind of things. And if we find that there's new settings that have happened, you might be able to point out, this is when digital timers kind of came in, or this is when automated internet-enabled rain sensing kind of things or whatever, which may inform us on what we might be able to do. Maybe we can encourage or give incentives for people to get internet-connected timers that aren't just dumb timers, but like mine. I had a smart gardener, I certainly didn't come up with this, who suggested I do this, and it tracks when the rain days are coming, and it keeps it off for me, or it anticipates when is the rain going to go, and it'll let me know when it's going to start back up again. But again, it just may be a way for us to look at a pretty simple chart that could possibly help us. I was just, and then following up on Commissioner Fay's comments about trying to do marketing or notification or communication, correct me if I'm wrong, but U.S. Postal Service is not an opt-in. So we could send a letter, and I think it takes maybe 2 days with standard postage, maybe even 1 day. So we do have potentially ways of communicating with someone, regardless of whether they opt in or not. If we notice that there's a huge amount of water, if we're sending out 1,700 notices a month, and some percentage of them are out of town and not checking their emails, some percentage of them have opted out or never opted in, we could say, and as you pointed out, it's an automated thing. So having an automated postcard that goes out into their mailbox, I think the city of Glendale and Glendale Water and Power has every right to legally send, just like every candidate running for dog catcher seems to send to my post office for elections, and I didn't opt in. So just a thought, it may be a way to communicate. Other than that, I want to congratulate staff always for your responsiveness and again, putting together an excellent, we had a lot of questions on the water at the last one. We appreciate you following up with some more granularity and some more information. Very much appreciate that.
Thanks.
With that, I think we are on to item number 5.
Item number 5, oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Commission may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The general manager may refer the matter to appropriate staff for investigation and report.
Do we have any oral communication?
President Peterson, we have no phone calls at this moment.
No phone calls and no in-person. Okay. With that, item number 6.
Item number 6, agenda forecast.
Great. I would like to thank Commissioner Fay for bringing to my attention, and I just want to bring it up here as we look at this and for the consideration of our colleagues. So I think I had raised the suggestion that we seem to have a lot of legislative update reports, which admittedly are nothing wrong with our legislative updates, but I think we have a very limited ability to sway our statewide lawmakers and our federal lawmakers, but it's important that we do have efforts to do so and raise things for the public to understand. That said, what I heard from our general manager was that he would look to reduce that number and look to put maybe other meaningful kind of agenda items. And a suggestion that I got from Commissioner Fay made a lot of sense to me. And he was suggesting that maybe we could have, and these could be cycled maybe throughout a year or throughout a 3-year cycle or something like that, where we have themed meetings, so that we may have, that are focused mostly on, as an example, say, vehicle electrification and what the impacts might be, and that I know that one of the difficulties and concerns, and I share that concern, I think all of us commissioners do, is we don't want to put extra burden on the staff. Anytime we ask you to do X, Y, Z, a theme this or talk about that, suddenly, on top of your day job, you're trying to go ahead and figure out how to come up with this information for us. And the suggestion that was brought forward is, could we invite exterior third parties who may be experts, maybe, and we know that they may come with their bias. So if we invite people from Tesla to talk, they will have a spin, but at the same time, with full disclosure, we might find that there's also a lot of information, certainly if we can question them, but it may be a way to get, free information to get us on a theme, or that we bring a number of players, so we're not just picking one manufacturer versus another, but we might have a number of commercial players, so that we get a sense. That's just an example. Reps from an EV charger equipment companies who have different ones, again, that may have different technologies and slightly different things. We might be able to invite transit people, with like the Glendale Beeline Transit Management, describing what they're doing, so that we might be able to find ways for either they're doing electrification or ways to supplant personal vehicles with public vehicles to reduce, especially as we electrify, electric usage we might do. So this seemed to be, in my mind, an insightful and excellent suggestion. I wanted to bring it up, and I personally am supportive of that and thankful that Alex brought that up, and just wanted to see if this is something that we might be able to kind of give direction as part of our agenda forecast that we'd like to maybe. So I guess two things. One is, within an annual part, could we look at bringing in third parties so that there's not as much burden on staff, number one. Number two, could we potentially come up with a cyclical themed kind of thing, one maybe on an annual basis? I think there already is in a certain way, but then to look at, rather than just a 1 year, could we try looking at a 3-year or 5-year kind of cycle? And I know new commissions come on and they can always peek it and tweak it, but it might set up a longer themed, multi-year theme kind of planning.
President Peterson, a suggestion I would make instead of bringing like outside people in is we have under contract now some vendors that help with these like in-home energy efficiency and some other programs. Maybe it would make more sense.
When I say third party, so if we have people under contract, consultants, vendors we're already using, EV charging companies that we already have under contract.
Right. To come and talk about our programs, I might suggest that as something other than just a random kind of outside sales pitch.
Yeah, and I would never, again, it would all be under the purview and control of staff to come up with, but just thinking outside the box, and we don't have to be limited to just inside,
I'll definitely share that with the general manager and the other AGMs as maybe an idea, because I know and it's one of the programs, I don't remember the name of it, but I see it advertised like on the Chamber of Commerce, but it's a GWP program, and maybe that vendor could come in and give a talk here about why it would be important to sign up with them and something like that. Okay. And the theme, do you mean like one meeting would just be water, or one meeting would just be electric, or what do you mean themed?
Potentially, other than sort of a consent agenda where we need to do things, rather than having maybe just sort of an eclectic, unrelated set of reports, that we maybe have a tie-in or theme, or you pick particularly if there's something that management and staff are very interested in, either community or the city council, you're trying to get, we are a vehicle for you all to be able to raise things through to, our elected officials. And so,
President Peterson, there's a couple things that we used to do that we haven't done in a very long time. We would have like a utility day, and we stopped doing that. And then we had, I think, some tailgate where we would have equipment out there and we'd invite people. And I think we stopped that during COVID as well. Maybe that's something, and I don't know that any of you were here or participated in any of those events. Would that be, because the public
that
comes,
would be helpful, and
commission comes.
Commissioner Fay, if I'm not describing your suggestion accurately, please.
I appreciate your endorsement and for raising the idea. And I think from my perspective, and I'll admittedly as a fairly new member of this body, looking at the agenda forecast, this looks to me as a somewhat perfunctory series of updates. And we are a utility and a city facing global level strategic challenges around climate change, energy reliability, water supply, and I think we can dig a little deeper into those issues and come up with some meatier content for us to discuss. I think that might be a better way to engage the public. Notice this is largely an empty chamber, and that's maybe because we're not targeting the right groups. If we had a meeting that was really about, say, electric vehicles, we can outreach to electric vehicle enthusiasts and groups that organize them, and I think we could probably get more public participation in these meetings, which I think would be great. So yeah, that's the idea, that by being a little bit more focused, we could all be a little bit more effective with the time we spend here.
We have an event where people bring their electric cars, and then people can sign up and come and drive them, if they're like new to electric cars. Would that be along the lines of what you're thinking? Like maybe have commission there as part of that event?
Yeah, that's a great event. I'm thinking from a policy discussion perspective, let's talk about all the issues that go with electric cars.
Okay.
What can we do to support them? What are the issues with charging at home? What are the issues with vehicle to grid bidirectional charging? There are people in Glendale who are going to be way ahead of GWP on some of these issues because they're tech enthusiasts, or they love their Tesla, or they want to sign up for something. And I don't feel we have a great cadence of topics on these meetings to dive into some of those meatier issues. And I think that's important that we make time and space to do that.
Okay.
Kind of corollary to that is, I might suggest that many of these reports that, one description might be perfunctory, but others are sort of a necessary and workaday. They're important. And just like how we have a consent calendar that we don't necessarily go into every little thing on it, we can take it as a block. You could include this, but not do the presentation with it. We can read it, the public can read it, we can go through, and if we happen to have any particular question, we could bring it out from consent. I'm used to, at least on boards that I've been on or where I've been staffed to, where we include as part of a consent agenda a number of written reports and things, and then a board can decide to pull off the consent to have a few questions addressed for that. But that would allow us to not make a choice between necessary routine reporting, but it's still crucial to let us benchmark year to year, season by season, but maybe use this time as the public forum for us to be able to bring more to the public understanding salient data, issues, and information, as well as what might be positions at GWP as experts and the stewards of water and power for the community would bring forward. So that just might be a way to be able to kind of not have to split the baby, as it were.
I'm just going out and seeing this is like a very detailed discussion about an item in itself. And I'm just wondering, would it make sense to agendize a discussion of?
That's a great suggestion. I personally would say that it's worthwhile because again, we may want to have the public have the opportunity that it is a item. It probably should be something then that we could actually take action on and give direction. Normally at this point, it's where, the typical agenda forecast, the way it's set up, is really not a action item, but where an individual person makes a request, would you mind putting this for a future agenda? And that gives the public enough time to then learn about it and so forth. But this kind of goes to how meetings are going to be run, sort of where decision points come about, and maybe how we focus, what the purpose of the commission meetings might be. And that does feel like a substantive discussion item that should be agendized and allow the public to weigh in.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's something, I don't know why we couldn't add it to the next month's meeting, just to have a discussion about.
So maybe put that instead of the legislative update in April?
Oh, instead of, okay.
Typically in April, there's not a whole, because, the governor's budget, it's just gone through the May revise. There really isn't anything. And the legislative cycle really doesn't kind of reach its fruition until sort of June 15th timeframe. So I'm just saying that I don't know that April there'd be a whole lot of expectation of an update, and it might be a good opportunity to get this agendized in a pretty timely manner. It would also give time that the new leadership for the commission itself would be installed and in place, and then we could move forward with the discussions after that in the following month. And any other items from my colleagues?
Yeah, I've got a couple.
Yes, please.
So I was thinking if you could do a report on the recycled water, considering where our water supplies are heading. I'd like to know what the status is of the recycled water supplies that we have. If we can extend the recycled water to substitute for potable water in certain places, and what it would take to do that. Is it money? Is it more staffing? Is it you've got to do a plan, some kind of plan, whatever that is? And then also explain the issues with the permit, discharge permit, and the LA River. Who are the stakeholders? What is going on with that particular process? That would be helpful.
Okay, definitely.
The other thing I would like is the big issue that's come up for me this past year is retirements and filling those positions. I know that other places are having that same issue with retirement, trying to find people that are qualified to fill certain positions. And then we've also got the issue with people having just decided to stop working because of the impacts of COVID. How has that been, how has there been an impact of either of those to the city, the water and power departments in particular? And how many vacancies are there now because of turnover? What is the turnover rate? Are there any new positions that haven't been filled? Are these positions budgeted? And if they're budgeted, what is going on? I'm assuming that means that they're in our rates then. And so are they going to be filled, or what's going to happen to our rates because of that?
Commissioner Jasmine Darian, also based on that too, because I think, well, all of you, have been here a little while. It might make sense for us as part of that to provide what our staffing was in 2010, kind of before the downsizing, to give you some context as well, if that's okay.
It would be good to benchmark it with other cities. Again, we're talking about neighboring cities, but to see how other cities are handling this. And is this possibly part of the reason that there's some permitting, the length of permitting is getting so long for some people? I've heard that from my neighbors too, that it's taking quite a long time to get permits. Is it because of lack of staffing that some of this is happening? And maybe that's just trying to catch up on staffing as well.
Commissioner Jasmine Darian, I think Mr. Scorza and I would be happy to give you some updates on that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fay?
When I was watching the City Council's consideration of the Shoal Canyon landfill project, or the biogas project, at the end of Councilmember Brotman's statements, I got the impression it was I'll support this, but I want some conditions. And he listed a few things, and one of them was a clean energy team in the GWP budget, and progress on distributed energy resources. He rattled off a number of things, 5 or 6, that I think are very germane to the operations of the department and may significantly change the direction of the department's operations. And I think it'd be good for us to talk through some of those things and get a report to understand how significant some of those things are, and perhaps a preview before you take them to the City Council. We can help provide some context or some guidance. So I would love to just bring that set of issues here for us to review at some point.
Commissioner Fay, is that sort of related to what Commissioner Jasmine Darian was asking in that context, or separately?
I was thinking separately.
Okay.
And then another separate issue that I don't see listed here, and maybe it's embedded in one of these other topic areas that I just don't see it, is rates. I think we go through a process periodically to reset rates based on our costs. So I assume separately for water and electricity, and I think that's a really important policy discussion for us to have, because rates can be as impactful as all of our other efficiency or conservation programs. The rates can give a really clear signal around shaping customers' behavior, and I think that's something we ought to consider here.
Commissioner Fay, and I think they would be separate reports, because I think we're on a different timing at this point. We were on the same timing the last time we adopted rates, but I think electric's going to go faster than water this time, just because of all those big projects. But definitely that is something that we would normally bring to commission as well. It's just been six years, I think. It's been about 6 years.
So is that something that we can forecast and kind of pin to one of these upcoming meetings if we're going to have to touch on both of those at some point this calendar year?
I know water would be December at the earliest. I'm not sure about electric. If Mr. Keenan, do you know when electric would be a good?
So Craig Heenan, AGM of Business Services. We are looking at electric rates right now because we have to update our COSA to accommodate, Grace and Shoal. That'll be done hopefully in the next month or so. And the timing is critical that we get these updated and approved by City Council in order to support the bonding for those projects.
Would April be a good?
I'm reluctant to say when.
Okay. I don't think we want to slow down the process or add another layer of approval, but just from my perception of the, frankly, blowback to the increase in trash collection fees recently, I think we should anticipate this will be a very contentious issue, and getting a few more
Yeah.
eyeballs on it's probably helpful.
We'll talk about it, and we'll definitely add it to a proposed agenda.
And water is doable, because we're gonna be looking at the whole process at the end of the year. Electric, it's above my pay grade on what happens there.
Okay. Well, if the timing is such that the next meeting is the best
We're
time,
looking
great.
to issue bonds in, say, June or July, and the COSA would have to be approved by city council prior to the bond, because we need to go to rating agencies and show them that we're willing to pay for the bond. And that'll happen in the, like I said, in the next month or two.
So I would suggest that it seems like a natural part of what's already scheduled as the energy update. It seems hard to have an energy update without also talking about a electric utility fee rate update.
What's the,
Mr. Keenan, could we at least just, because I know we're talking a lot right now and it's not agendized, maybe have a couple slides that just at least describes the process to give a
all
good
I'm saying
idea
is
of that.
that
we can do whatever is
So
decided.
on the agenda forecast for March 6th, one of the items that's proposed is an energy update. I'm not quite sure what that entails.
Yeah,
So if I was on the city council, and then if I was later going to be on bond council or something like that, I would be uncomfortable voting for rates that I knew had not been discussed at the commission specifically constituted to oversee the utility. And then if I was bond counsel, I would be asking the city council, do you feel well informed that you're doing this? Did your commission weigh in on this so that we can make these representations to the voters? And I don't think they would want to say, no, we didn't ever bring this up before. We voted on it to the commission.
Sure.
So I'm just saying, it feels like we have an item on the March 6th agenda that would fit well with something. And to my colleagues' comments, it isn't about slowing it down or putting another layer. It's actually trying to make sure that we can, be a benefit to the process.
the schedule we're on right now, we won't know what the rate impacts would be until the end of March.
Understood, but it might be where you're just saying, here is the process, here's the timeline, and we don't know what the rate would be, but here are the factors that would go into it, and we see it as that it might be on the low end X, on the high end Y, and then, this is sort of what's going in. These are the factors that would help determine that at least is a way for using this body and meeting as an opportunity to inform and prep people.
President Peterson, and I would say the last time we did have commission involved because we had public outreach as part of the process. So I would imagine that we may even have a special meeting if we need to.
And that may be the case, that we need to have a special meeting. Again, it feels like there's already a natural placeholder. If we're talking about energy and then we talk about what people might have to pay for that energy and what we're going through as that process. So I think your timing is spot on, and we just want to make sure that we're beneficial to the process.
Sure thing.
Okay, thank you.
We will.
One question or for our council. I hear you, Commissioner Fay, that at the city council you had Councilman Brotman making sort of, but I guess I'm a little bit cautious that, was there a consensus or direction from the council to staff saying, yes, let's go ahead and put his, because any one council member does not have the authority to give direction. The body does. So if one person says, I'm going to vote for this, but I want X, Y, Z, and the body said, you either vote or you don't, and that person voted, they don't have to adopt the X, Y, Z. And I'm just concerned that I'm not sure that we want to be seen as supporting one council person's requests or perspective versus another council person's, but be respectful for the whole body.
Sure, I'm not sure what the final decision was or whether those were formal, directives or not. To me, they were ideas that seemed like they would have a big impact on this department, and also seemed like things that we probably ought to be talking about, whether we decide to do them or not. So I thought it'd be worth to bring it up in this forum and maybe have a more in-depth discussion than they could have at the city council after it was the end of a 5-hour hearing or something like
Yeah,
that.
no, that's a great clarification. So it sounds like one is,
President Peterson, commission members, Commissioner Fay, if I may respond. The items that Councilmember Brotman brought up, they weren't incorporated. The resolution wasn't updated to make them mandates. However, the consensus was that staff was going to look into those items and would make presentations to the city council. So if the commission so desires, staff could also make a presentation to the GWP Commission as they're taking those items to the city council.
that's perfect. That's all I just wanted a clarification on. And the other part is, even if they hadn't had a consensus, independently, we can just simply say if one council member raises something and then we independently, as commissioners, feel that those are salient and relevant issues, we would be potentially discussing it not because of one person or supporting one person's position, but because we feel as commissioners it's something that is our duty and something within the purview. But to make sure that we make sort of that clarification. Great. So it sounds like looking into those items that were discussed and there was consensus for at the board meeting, we would be delighted to be able to get some sort of a report when that's coming forth. Great.
Okay.
Any other items? All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Any second?
I second.
Motion seconded. We don't have to take a vote. Adjourned.